The silence in the master bedroom of the Miller estate wasn't the peaceful quiet of a Saturday morning. It was a heavy, pressurized stillness that precedes a devastating storm. Ethan stood in the doorway, his chest tightening as he watched Julianne pull a vintage leather suitcase from the top shelf of the walk-in closet. The sound of the zipper sliding open echoed like a gunshot in the sterile perfection of their suburban life. For 10 years, they had been the undisputed it couple of Oak Creek, Illinois. They were the high school sweethearts who had actually made it, the ones with the sprawling colonial home, the prestigious law firm partnership, and the golden retriever named Jasper, who sat confused at the foot of the bed. But as the suitcase hit the duvet with a dull thud, the 10-year illusion didn't just crack, it pulverized. Ethan reached out, his hand hovering inches from her shoulder, trembling. "Julie, please, talk to me. We can fix this. Whatever happened at the gala, whatever stress you're under with the foundation, we can work through it. We always do." Julianne didn't stop. She folded a silk cream-colored blouse with a clinical, detached precision that terrified him more than any scream could. When she finally looked up, her eyes, usually a warm, inviting hazel, were as cold and flat as a frozen lake. There was no anger there, no resentment, only a terrifying, hollow resolve. "There's nothing to fix, Ethan. I'm not angry with you. I'm finally awake," she said, her voice devoid of the melody he had fallen in love with. She picked up a framed photo of them from their honeymoon in Maui, sun-kissed and laughing, and placed it face down on the mahogany dresser. "He's the man I really love," she said, the words falling like lead weights. "And I'm going to him. I'm done living this lie." Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Here on Family Secrets and Revenge, we've seen that the most beautiful homes often hide the ugliest truths. Ethan felt the floor drop out from under him, a physical sensation of vertigo that made him grab the doorframe for support. "He? Who is he, Julie? We've been together every single day for a decade. I know your schedule. I know your friends. I know your passwords. When did this even happen? Who could possibly be worth throwing away 10 years of marriage for?" He scanned his mental archives, searching for a name, a face, a stray look at a cocktail party. Was it Mark, the ambitious junior partner? Was it the architect she'd been consulting for the new library wing? None of it made sense. Julianne had always been his rock, the one person in Oak Creek who didn't care about the social climbing or the neighborhood gossip. "You think you know me because you know my routine, Ethan," Julianne said, snapping the locks on her suitcase. The sound was final, like a judge's gavel. "But you never looked past the surface. You loved the version of me that fit into your life. You loved the Mrs. Miller who looked good at your firm's Christmas parties. You never once asked about the girl I was before I moved here. You never asked about the life I had to bury just to survive." She grabbed her coat, her movements fluid and practiced. She looked like a woman who had been rehearsing this exit for 1,000 nights in her head. "He's someone who knew me when I was whole. He's someone you could never understand because your world is built on safety. His world is built on something real. He's the man I've belonged to since I was 18. The driveway of their home on Willow Lane was bathed in the flickering, artificial glow of the streetlights. Ethan followed her out into the crisp Illinois air, his breath hitching in his throat. He felt small, pathetic, standing there in his silk pajamas while his wife loaded her life into the back of her SUV. "You're leaving tonight? In the middle of the night? Julie, think about the optics. What do I tell the neighbors? What do I tell your parents?" "Martha and Arthur will be devastated," Ethan pleaded, grasping at the only things he thought she still cared about: reputation and family. Julianne paused with her hand on the driver's side door. A bitter, jagged smile touched her lips. "Tell them whatever helps you sleep, Ethan. Tell them I had a breakdown. Tell them I was kidnapped. And as for my parents, don't worry about them. They've known this day was coming since the moment they handed me over to you. They were just waiting for the check to clear." She climbed into the car and the engine roared to life, a low, predatory growl that seemed out of place in the quiet cul-de-sac. Ethan stood on the pavement, the cold biting through his clothes as he watched the red glow of her taillights fade into the darkness. She was heading toward the interstate, toward a mystery man who had managed to dismantle a decade of loyalty with a single phone call. He was no longer Ethan and Julie. He was just a man standing alone in the dark, in a house that suddenly felt like a tomb. The morning after was a blur of gray light and stale coffee. Ethan sat at the kitchen island, the marble surface feeling cold and clinical. The house was too quiet. The silence was deafening. Every creak of the floorboards upstairs sounded like her phantom footsteps. Every time the wind brushed against the window, he expected to hear her key in the lock. He spent the first few hours in a state of paralysis. But then the lawyer in him took over. He needed evidence. He needed a why. He began a forensic sweep of their life. He opened their shared iMac, but the browser history was a desert, wiped clean at 11 p.m. the night before. He checked their bank accounts, but there were no large withdrawals, no suspicious charges at jewelry stores or hotels. Then he moved to the physical. He searched her vanity, her desk, the pockets of her winter coats. He felt like a scavenger picking through the ruins of a fallen civilization. Finally, in the back of a kitchen drawer, tucked inside a tattered copy of The Joy of Cooking that Julianne's grandmother had given her, he found a small, crumpled slip of paper. It was a receipt from the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar in a rough part of the Chicago shipyards, dated 3 weeks ago. On the back, in a jagged, aggressive scrawl that certainly wasn't Julianne's, were the words, "The debt is called in, Jules. 10 years is long enough. Meet me where the water turns black. Don't be late." Ethan drove to the city with a sense of impending doom. The Chicago shipyards were a far cry from the manicured lawns of Oak Creek. The air smelled of salt, rust, and diesel. The Rusty Anchor was a low-slung building with boarded-up windows and a neon sign that buzzed like a dying insect. He stepped inside, his expensive wool coat marking him as a target immediately. He sat at the bar and ordered a whiskey he didn't want. He showed a photo of Julianne to the bartender, a man whose face looked like a roadmap of bad decisions. "Have you seen her? She would have been here about 3 weeks ago, probably with a man." The bartender barely glanced at the photo. "Yeah, I remember. Hard to forget a girl who looks like she belongs on a yacht sitting in a dump like this. She was with a guy who looked like he'd crawled out of a storm drain. Tall, scarred up, eyes like a shark. They didn't look like they were on a date, buddy. They looked like they were negotiating a hostage release." He called her Butterfly. "That ring a bell?" "Butterfly?" Ethan whispered. It didn't. He realized he didn't even know her pet names. Did he give a name? He didn't have to. Everyone around here knows the Vane family, or what's left of them. That was Leo Vane, the brother who was supposed to have died in that warehouse fire back in 16. The name Vane sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. When he first started dating Julianne, her father, Arthur Whitlock, had warned him about the trash in the city. The Vanes were a rival family in the shipping and offshore logistics business, a clan known for being as ruthless as they were wealthy. The Whitlocks and the Vanes had been locked in a bitter legal and commercial war for generations over terminal rights in the Great Lakes. Ethan drove straight to his father-in-law's estate in Lake Forest. Arthur Whitlock was sitting in his library surrounded by first edition books and the smell of expensive tobacco. "Ethan," Arthur said, not looking up from his paper, "you look like hell. I assume the girl finally took flight." "Julianne left me, Arthur. She said she's going to the man she loves. And I just heard the name Leo Vane in a shipyard bar. Tell me the truth. What is my wife's connection to that family? Why does she have a nickname I've never heard?" Arthur sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "Ethan, some families are built on blood, and some are built on secrets. In the Vanes and the Whitlocks, we didn't just compete, we bled each other dry. 10 years ago, a deal was made to stop the killing. Julianne was part of that deal. She was the collateral that kept the peace. She was the peace treaty." Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Do you think Ethan was ever more than a pawn in this family war? Or was his entire marriage just a contract written in invisible ink? Let me know what you think of Arthur's admission in the comments of Family Secrets and Revenge. Ethan couldn't wrap his head around it. "Collateral, she's a human being, Arthur. Not a stock option. I've spent 10 years building a life with her, and you're telling me it was all just a settlement agreement? In our world, Ethan, there is no difference, Arthur said, finally looking at him with eyes that were as sharp as flint. Leo Vane was obsessed with my daughter. He was dangerous, unstable, and quite frankly, he was bad for business. We staged a disappearance for him after the fire, paid off the right people in the CPD, and in exchange, the Vanes agreed to stay out of our territory if Julianne married someone safe, someone like you, a man with no past and a predictable future, a man who wouldn't ask questions when she was quiet for 3 days at a time. So my entire life, my marriage, it was all a witness protection program for your business interests? Ethan's voice cracked. It was a peaceful life, wasn't it? Arthur countered. You had a beautiful wife and a career. You shouldn't have gone looking, Ethan. Leo Vane is back because the money we used to keep him quiet in Europe ran out, and he's come to claim what he thinks is his. If you're smart, you'll sign the divorce papers and walk away before you become another casualty of a war. You don't even have the weapons to fight. Ethan didn't walk away. Instead, he hired Silas Vance, a private investigator who specialized in high-stakes corporate espionage and disappearing persons. Silas was a man who lived in the gray areas of the law, a man who understood that in a city like Chicago, money could buy any truth, and leverage could buy any soul. I need to know where Leo Vane is keeping her, Ethan told Silas in a rain-slicked alleyway behind the courthouse. It's not keeping her, kid, Silas said, lighting a cigarette that smelled of cheap cloves. My scouts say she went there willingly. They're holed up in a fortified compound in the old Third Ward. It's an old textile mill converted into a fortress. Leo's got private security, ex-military types. You go in there, you don't come out in one piece. And even if you do, what are you going to say to a woman who left you for a dead man? I don't care, Ethan said. I need to hear it from her. I need to know if any of it was real. I need to know if the last 10 years were just a performance. Silas looked at him with a mix of pity and respect. All right, but you're going to need a distraction. Leo Vane has a weakness. He's arrogant. He thinks he's invisible now that he's back from the dead. We're going to hit him where it hurts. His bank account. We're going to track the offshore pips he's been moving. The old Third Ward was a skeleton of Chicago's industrial past, and the textile mill stood like a monolith against the gray sky. Ethan approached the gate, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He didn't have a weapon, only a folder full of the financial records Silas had dug up. Proof that Leo Vane had been laundering money through the Whitlock Foundation for years. I'm Ethan Miller, he shouted into the intercom, his voice echoing off the cold brick. Tell Leo I have the ledger. Tell him I know about the Swiss transfers. Tell him if he doesn't let me see my wife, the feds get a copy in 10 minutes. The heavy iron gates hummed open with a mechanical, industrial groan. Ethan drove through the courtyard, flanked by men in tactical gear who watched him with professional indifference. He was led into a vast, open-plan living space filled with modern art and steel furniture that looked more like torture implements than chairs. There, standing by a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the dark, churning river, was Julianne. She was wearing a black silk dress, her hair let down in a wild, unkempt way she never wore it in Oak Creek. Beside her stood a man with a jagged scar running from his ear to his chin, his eyes reflecting the cold gray of the water outside. Leo Vane. You're persistent, Ethan. I'll give you that, Leo said, his voice a gravelly rasp. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who had survived hell and brought a piece of it back with him. He was younger than Ethan expected, but his skin was toughened by years in hiding. Julie, come with me, Ethan pleaded, ignoring Leo. We can go to the police. We can tell them everything. Your father, the money, the peace treaty. We can end this. You don't have to be a prisoner to this man's obsession. You don't have to be a bargain anymore. Julianne stepped forward, but she didn't move toward Ethan. She moved closer to Leo, her hand instinctively finding his arm, her fingers tracing the scar on his jaw. I'm not a prisoner, Ethan. I told you. He's the man I love. He's the man I've loved since I was 16 years old. Everything you and I had, it was a dream I was forced to have. Leo is the reality. You were just the silence between the screams. A reality of crime and violence? Ethan yelled. "This man is a ghost. He's a criminal who left you for 10 years. He didn't leave me," Julianne screamed back, her eyes finally showing emotion. Rage. "My father sent him away. My father tried to kill him. I stayed with you to keep the assassins away from his door. Every time I kissed you, I was picturing him. Every time I said I love you, I was saying it to the memory of Leo Vane. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. If you found out your spouse only married you to save the life of their true love, would you feel like a hero or a victim? Let's discuss the moral tension of Julianne's choice in the comments of Family Secrets and Revenge. Leo Vane smiled, a slow, predatory movement that made Ethan's skin crawl. You see, Miller? You were the perfect camouflage, a boring, respectable lawyer. No one looks for a dead Vane in the shadow of a man who spends his weekends mowing the lawn and his weekdays filing motions. You should thank me. I gave you 10 years with a woman you never could have won on your own. You got the best version of her." The arrogance in Leo's voice snapped something inside Ethan. The years of being the perfect husband, the years of supporting her through her depressions, which he now realized were just grief for Leo, came boiling up. He threw the folder onto the steel coffee table. "The camouflage is gone, Leo. That folder contains every transaction between the Whitlock Foundation and your offshore accounts. It shows exactly how you funded your resurrection using the money my firm helped manage. If I don't check in with my guy in an hour, that file goes to the Department of Justice." Leo's expression shifted from amusement to a cold, calculating rage. He looked at Julianne, then back at Ethan. "You think you're a player now? Ethan, you're playing with fire in a room full of gasoline. You think the feds are your friends? Half of them were on the Whitlock payroll when I died." "Then let it burn," Ethan said, "because I have nothing left to lose. My house is empty, my wife is a stranger, and my life is a contract. I'm fine with the fire." As the tension in the room reached a breaking point, the elevator doors at the end of the hall opened with a sharp ding. Out stepped Martha and Arthur Whitlock. They didn't look like the grieving parents Ethan expected. They looked like business partners arriving for a board meeting, dressed in tailored wool and smelling of success. "That's enough, Ethan," Arthur said, his voice booming in the industrial space. "Give us the ledger, and we'll ensure you're taken care of. A comfortable settlement, a quiet divorce, or and a new life anywhere you want. We can even get you a judgeship in the Second Circuit." Ethan looked at his mother-in-law, Martha. She was clutching her designer handbag, her eyes darting between Leo and Julianne. "You too? You watched me every day for 10 years. You came over for Sunday dinners. You told me I was the son you never had. You saw me trying to make her happy when she was crying in the dark. Was any of that real?" Martha looked away, her face tight. "We did what was necessary for the family, Ethan. The Vanes and the Whitlocks are merging our shipping interests. This marriage between Leo and Julianne, it's the final piece of the puzzle. It's what should have happened a decade ago. It's the only way to protect the assets." "It's not a marriage," Ethan spat. "It's a merger. And I'm just the redundant employee being laid off. But you forgot one thing, Arthur. Redundant employees sometimes take the trade secrets with them when they go." Ethan realized he was surrounded. Leo's guards were closing in, their hands hovering near their waistbands. His own family had turned into vipers. He had one card left to play, a gamble he'd discussed with Silas. "You're right, Leo. I am just a boring lawyer," Ethan said, reaching into his pocket slowly. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out his phone. "But a boring lawyer knows how to record a conversation. This entire merger meeting, the talk about the payroll, the Swiss transfers, the fake death, it's been streaming live to a secure server. Silas, you got all that?" A voice crackled from the phone's speaker, loud and clear. "Every word, Ethan. And the feds are already at the gate. They weren't the ones on the payroll, Leo. They're the ones looking for a promotion." The room erupted into chaos. Leo grabbed Julianne, pulling her toward a back exit leading to the helipad. Arthur started screaming at the guards to deal with the lawyer. Ethan took the opportunity to bolt toward the elevator, diving behind a steel pillar as the first shot rang out. Not at him, but at the security cameras. As he reached the ground floor, he heard the sirens, the high-pitched, rhythmic wail of the FBI task force. He stepped out into the night air, watching as the black SUVs swarmed the compound like a colony of ants. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had just set fire to his own heart to keep from freezing. The fallout was spectacular. When the Great Whitlock-Vane merger became the scandal of the decade in Illinois. Arthur and Leo were indicted on dozens of counts of racketeering, tax evasion, and conspiracy. The perfect families of Oak Creek were exposed as a criminal syndicate dressed in luxury brands. Ethan returned to his empty home on Willow Lane. He spent the next week packing his own things, the house feeling like a museum of a life he never really lived. He looked at the walk-in closet where it had all started. He found a stray earring of Julianne's under the dresser, a simple pearl. He remembered buying it for her on their 5th anniversary in Chicago. He wondered now if she had been thinking of Leo's scar when she kissed him for it. He realized that his love hadn't been a lie, even if hers was. He had been a good husband. He had been loyal. And in the end, with that loyalty was the only thing that had survived the fire. But the house was sold, the firm was tainted, and Ethan Miller was a man without a country. 2 months later, while the trial was in full swing, and the newspapers were still screaming about the ghost of Chicago, Ethan received a visitor at his new modest apartment in the city. It was Julianne. She wasn't wearing silk anymore. She looked haggard, her skin pale and her eyes shadowed with a deep, haunting exhaustion. "They let me out on bail," she said, standing in the hallway, refusing to come in. "Leo's still inside. They're going to give him 20 years, Ethan. My father, too. The lawyers say the recordings you made are unbreakable." "What do you want, Julie? Are you here to tell me you love me now, that the man you really love is behind bars? Are you here to ask for another 10 years of camouflage?" Ethan's voice was hollow, stripped of all the warmth he once felt. "No," she said, her voice a whisper that barely carried in the hallway. "I'm here to tell you I'm pregnant. And this time, it's yours. There's no Leo, no Vanes, no Whitlocks. Just a baby who is going to grow up in a world of lies unless I do something. I didn't see him in Europe, Ethan. I only saw him at the mill. This child is yours." Ethan felt a cold shock, a physical blow to his stomach. "You think I'd believe you, after you told me I was the silence between the screams?" "Check the dates, Ethan. We were trying for a family, remember? Before Leo came back. Before the debt was called in. I was already carrying your child when I told you I loved him. I said those things to make you stay away. To keep Leo from hurting you. He would have killed you, Ethan. I had to make him believe you were nothing to me." Ethan stood at a crossroads that felt like a canyon. He could walk away and let Julianne drown in the mess her family had created. He could let the child be born into a legacy of crime and secrets, labeled by the media as the Vane Whitlock heir. Or he could do the one thing no one in the Vane or Whitlock families ever did. He could show mercy to a person who didn't deserve it. If this is another play, Julie, if you're just trying to use me for a lighter sentence or a place to hide from your father's enemies, I'm not, she sobbed, collapsing against the doorframe, her strength finally failing her. I have nothing left. No money, no family, no Leo. I just want my child to have a father who isn't a ghost. I want him to be a Miller, not a Whitlock. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time in months, he didn't see the collateral or the merger. He saw a broken woman who had been a pawn her entire life. But he also saw the woman he had loved for 10 years, the woman he had built his entire identity around. Go inside, he said, stepping aside and opening the door to his small empty apartment. But if you lie to me once, one single time, I will personally hand the evidence to the prosecutor. You're on probation, Julie. Not just with the law, but with me. We're going to get a DNA test, and we're going to live a very, very quiet life. If you were in Ethan's shoes, facing a situation like this, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you take her back for the sake of the child? Or is the betrayal too deep to ever truly forgive? Let's hear your take on this final twist in the comments of Family Secrets and Revenge. The trial lasted another year. Arthur Whitlock and Leo Vane were sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The Miller home in Oak Creek was sold at auction to pay off the legal debts and back taxes. Julianne gave birth to a son, whom Ethan named David, after his own father, a man who had been a simple carpenter and had never told a lie in his life. They moved to a quiet town in northern Wisconsin, far away from the shipping lanes of Chicago and the gossip of the suburbs. Ethan worked as a public defender for the local county, and Julianne stayed home, her days filled with the simple, exhausting routines of motherhood. They were the new people in town, a quiet couple with a young son and a haunted look in their eyes. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind would howl off the lake and the house would creak, Ethan would catch her staring out the window toward the south. He would see her touch the empty space on her ring finger where the Whitlock crest used to be. He knew she wasn't thinking of him. He knew she was thinking of the man in the cell in Terre Haute, the man who had been her heart since she was 16. He realized then that you can save a person, but you can't change their soul. He was the man she lived with, the man who raised her child, but Leo was still the man she loved. And that was the price he paid for his mercy, living with a woman who was physically present but spiritually miles away. 10 years after the divorce was finalized and then ignored, Ethan sat on his porch, watching David play in the yard. The boy was 9 now and he was brilliant, but he had Leo's eyes, the same dark, shark-like intensity that seemed to see through everything. It was a constant reminder that the past never truly stays buried. It grows, it breathes, and it eventually comes to the surface in the next generation. Julianne came out with 2 glasses of lemonade, her face lined with the stresses of a life lived in hiding. She smiled at him, a soft, practiced smile that she had perfected over a decade. "He looks just like you, Ethan," she said, her voice sounding like she almost believed it. Ethan took the glass, his eyes never leaving the boy who was currently building a fort out of sticks, a fortress of his own. "No, he doesn't, Julie, and we both know it. He looks like a man who is going to go looking for his father one day." She didn't argue. She just sat down beside him, and they watched the sun set over the lake. They were 2 people living a quiet life built on the ashes of a loud one. The revenge was complete, the secrets were out, but the hunger for what might have been still lingered in the air like wood smoke. Ethan realized he had won the war, but he had lost the girl the moment she first said, "He's the man I really love." Thank you so much for joining us for this massive cinematic journey on family secrets and revenge. This story reminds us that the truth isn't always something that sets you free. Sometimes it's just the cage you choose to live in. If you were moved by Ethan's journey, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your overall thoughts below. Do you think Ethan made the right choice by taking her back? Tell me your point of view in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, keep your secrets close.